Welcome back to Got No Control podcast. I am your host, RONEK. And before I introduce my special guest today, I want to invite you guys to head over to gotnocontrol.com and check out our official merchandise. Grab yourself a t-shirt, a hoodie, a poster, much more. This is a way to support us, to keep to do what we do. And also, make sure to take a look at our Got No Control New Era fitted cap that we dropped. We got a few sizes left. I want to give a shout out to everyone that supported the drop. Stay tuned for that. Make sure you check it out. Link will be in the description. And with that being said, I want to introduce my special guest today, Dino. How you doing today, brother?
Great. Thank you for having me.
I just want to, thank you for stopping by and giving me a little bit of your time. The dance culture is something that has always caught my attention as a young kid coming up, as a young teen. And there's so much history behind it. And it aligns with the graffiti culture in a way, right? It's kind of like the long distance cousin. So I definitely
actually closely related, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I definitely like to, explore the rich history that's in the dance culture. And I know you have so much history, so I want to dive into that.
Right on.
And I want to hop into this by, what is home to Dino? What do you call home?
My place? Like place of home?
Like growing up, or what is home to you?
Orange County.
Orange
County, and more specifically, Buena Park and Fullerton area.
Okay.
That is home base.
Buena Park is where not, is that right?
Yes. yes. And that Buena Park is where the city I lived in when I first got into second city I lived in on my dance journey.
I was reading the Knots history. It's crazy, bro, because they say that Knots, some people say it was because they used to pick berries, but what I read was that they had some of the best fried chicken there, and that's why people were coming in there.
From Knott's Berry Farm?
Yeah.
I got a quick little story for you. I actually won an art contest back in 1985, and along with the certificate, which I still have, they gave me a free dinner for me and my family at, oh my God, why is the fried chicken place name is I'm spacing on it. But that was the first time my art was able to buy my family a dinner for four, courtesy of Knott's Berry Farm. And I still have that certificate to this day.
That must have been a great feeling, huh? Like, hey, Mom, I got it today.
Absolutely. Free passes into the park and dinner.
Oh.
So, yeah, that's awesome that you mentioned that.
And I'm sure it was a lot different in the 80s than what it is today.
Yes. Overall, yes.
Tell me a little bit about Dino as a young child. How was it growing up at home? And do you come from a really big family?
Well, I was born in the city of Orange. And early on, we lived in Santa Ana. And then afterwards, we moved to Orange. And 1980, we moved to Florida, myself and my family, of course. And then I lived in Maryland for a little bit, then back to Florida, and then eventually came back to California and landed in Buena Park. And my childhood was a mix of both normal and turbulent. So there were different seasons where life was turbulent and other seasons where we're living just like any typical family, you know what I'm saying? And that was all, just because of what, my dad changing jobs or like, just things that families go through. So moves and stuff. But it was in the city of Orange where, and I've told this story before, where the first thing I ever witnessed was a DJ setup. And that was in 1980. And that came from my mom, her friend's boyfriend or husband, I'm not sure what they were, was a DJ. His name was Nick. So this was in Orange County, in the city of Orange back in 1980.
Okay.
So as a kid, I would see his record collection and his sound system under the stairwell of the apartment, in an apartment. I used to play with their son. We were both the same age. So that was my first glimpse into anything that's relevant to the elements of the culture, was a DJ.
To take a small rewind, I feel that in general, there's a certain time in life where you kind of remember, like, I went from being a kid to now I'm exploring my mind into what's out there, what's around me, what I want to do, whether it be kick a ball around or scribble a crayon. That spark, did that ignite from your mom's boyfriend at the moment? Or is there something prior to that got you kind of opening your mind to like what's around me.
Well, let me correct that at first. It was actually my mom's friend's
Okay.
boyfriend.
Okay, sorry.
So I used to play with their son. I know it gets a little complicated when I because I'm not throwing any names like, oh, that's so it was my mom's friend. Her boyfriend was a DJ.
Okay.
And I used to play with their son. We were little. We were like in kindergarten, first grade. And that's when I first caught a glimpse of that. But along with that, I also had neighbors that were like souping up their muscle cars. So I really got into muscle cars. There were other things happening. And then I had that brief stint living in Florida. And, living in Florida and in Maryland, we were just into 80s music, Men at Work and, just very early 80s music, 1980, 81, 82. And, late 82, early 83 is when we moved back to Orange County. And I think what you described, for me, that probably would have been when I first saw popping.
Okay.
As relevant to the dance conversation. And that is, I have like this kind of like foggy memory, but I still remember it was the first time I saw popping. And then later I would catch glimpses of, the break-in and other dance styles that influenced me. So back then it would most likely be popping, locking, and breaking.
So 83, you're back in Santa Ana.
Buena Park.
Buena Park.
Yeah.
So in Buena Park in 83, how old are you?
I'm 9.
You're 9.
Yeah.
And you already got influenced to hip hop through a friend.
No, let me rewind as far as the first anything that's close to hip hop. It would be seeing poppin', and anything that's close to, I guess you could say, rap. Wasn't Sugar Hill Gang for me, which I never really liked that song anyways, the Rappers Delight, because that's usually the starting point for most people. Actually, the first thing that I heard that was anything close to like rapping was Double Dutch Bus.
Okay.
Frankie Smith. Like it wasn't really hip hop, but just what he was doing caught my attention. And I remember that specifically. And then after that was like, of course, like the Planet Rock, Looking for the Perfect Beat. And one specifically would be, one moment specifically would be getting the Buffalo Gals tape with Do You Like Scratching on it? She's Looking Like a Hobo. Because I took that cassette tape, kind of fast forwarding here a little bit, but I took it to show and tell with the box, went in front of the class and started doing this new dance style called breaking.
Mm-hmm.
My teacher at the time, Mrs. Stanton, allowed it, and she was always encouraging us to dance. She would take us into the cafeteria to do dancing and stuff. But that was one of those moments that I remember where it was like, this is what I'm choosing, and it was pushing play on that. And I was not shy at all. I just started busting for the class. So instead of bringing a stuffed animal or a toy train, I brought a box and I started busting in front of the class. That was 1983.
For someone like me, brother, these songs and the dance is kind of like it's always been their type thing. But for someone like you that was there when it barely hit the streets, when it's fresh, it's new, and you're like, whoa, how's that feeling?
Electric. Okay. When this was hitting the hood, okay, and hitting everything at street level, at first it was like a lot of funk. So there was other culture happening. It wasn't specifically hip hop. Like when you talk about some of the hip hop graffiti or the graffiti, the first glimpse I got was actually cholo writing. And that's the first style I started learning how to do. It was funk that I was listening to, like Midnight Star, or not that, I specifically was listening to, but things that were being played out of cars and, albums that were being played. It was like funk music, right? And lost my train of thought. What was your question again?
Question was being there when it hits.
Okay. So there was that electric energy that was just kind of consuming the hood because it felt very new. One thing that's a fact, okay, is that I was part of the very first wave of kids to do this dance in Orange County in Southern California, because most hip hop as it came together happened in the early 80s. And if you're a part of that first wave of hip hop, you have a way different perspective on what is going on, for example, now, because you're a part of the inception when it hit, when it started formulating in Southern California, LA, all of Southern California. And it was exciting because it felt very sacred at that time because it was just in the hood. It wasn't, a lot of people were influenced by the movies a year or two later, but it was actually reversed for me because by the time you were seeing it in the movies, it wasn't like I was inspired by the movies. I was actually thinking as a kid, they're doing what we're doing, but now it's on a movie. So
when you say
reversed.
Movies, is it kind of like a Beat Street type movie?
Beat Street and Breakin'. So by the time those movies came out, for me, it was like, oh, they're doing what we have already been doing over the past year and a half. So, you'd walk around the streets, you would be able to pick up on energy. You would know that, oh, they're dressed like poppers. Oh, they're dressed like breakers. And it was a very small percentage of kids. And of course, it exploded. Everybody was breaking and popping by 84, 85. But late 82, early 83, you were part of like the very first wave of kids. It was electric. It was exciting. It was, for lack of elaborating anymore, or for lack of other words, it was just new. And it was a new energy. It was almost like this energy was bestowed onto us by something a little more like a higher source, to give us those talents and those outlets for expression. That's what it felt like to me, and like I said, it felt a little more sacred.
To your knowledge, how did that style of dance and get introduced to Buena Park? Like, how did that come to Buena Park? How did you guys become aware of this style of dance?
That's great. Well, magically, when we moved into Buena Park, we moved in right across the street from Buena Park High School. So two people that are key people, one of which I'm still in touch with to this day, and that were, aside from my older brother and sister, that are really relevant as far as indirect inspirations to me. Meaning, when I say indirect, I was just around their energy. I don't dance like them. I wasn't trying to dance like these influences. It was just being in that scene, that early scene. There was a group of dancers out of Buena Park High School. And being that I lived right across the street, I would see them, and one dude specifically, this dude named Teddy, he was going out with the neighborhood hottie, this girl, Rita, in the Buena Park apartments. So he would hang out with her after school. And I would just I was a kid, I'd just be like peeping him out, like just the way he dressed. He'd be wearing red and black. He had the baggies on, the kung fu slippers, the windbreaker, and he had like a beret on. And I was like, man, this guy's he's just dope, and he would have his box with him. It was out of his box that I first heard White Lines, by the way.
And you mean boombox?
Yeah.
Okay.
So his ghetto blaster, his box, his boombox. And so it was Teddy that he's originally from Flatbush, Brooklyn. So as a transplant from Brooklyn, he more than likely brought some of that style down, to Orange County.
Okay.
So credit to him, because I used to watch him break and I'd be like, whoa. So that was that influence. And on the other hand, there's this dude named Coco Pop, Greg, who he's known for a dance clip in the movie Colors, the movie about the Bloods and Crips that came out. Okay, 1988, I think it came out. And there's a house party scene, and he's one of the poppers in that scene.
Okay.
And he eventually went on to dance for Gerardo, Rico Suave. A lot of people know that 1990 song. He toured with them and all that. But I would see him in my hood back in 1982, 83, 84, up until 85. And he had he was hanging out with like Boogaloo Shrimp, dancing at Studio K and other places. But what I remember from him, specifically one memory, was me walking around Buena Park Mall back in the 80s when kids would hang out at the mall. And I remember seeing him practice in front of the mirrors inside of Kenny's shoe stores where he worked. And I remember exactly his hair, everything. And I'm just like, whoa, he's so cool. So I was just kind of like watching him. So that would be like an early influence. But to kind of answer your question, it's a combination of like people that are coming in, transplants from the East Coast and West Coast dance styles, which were predominantly backyard party dancing, popping and locking.
It's interesting to imagine that in the 80s, somebody would want to leave Brooklyn, New York to just come all the way down to like Buena Park, Santa Ana, Long Beach. You know what I mean? It's kind of the idea is interesting of that's a big move.
Well, they were still kids, so I'm
Yeah.
sure it was the parents' decision. You know? It's like, yeah, Teddy, when I first saw him dancing, he was in high school and I was younger, but I used to just kind of like, him and his crew, I think they were called Generation One.
Okay.
And luckily, there was a little snippet of Buena Park High School at a breaking battle that happened in 1984 that's online on YouTube. Thank goodness for that, because that's the only known footage I have of Teddy. And I'll send you the little clip. And that was a breaking contest that happened inside of Knott's Berry Farm, most likely where they had Studio K, which was a dance club in the 80s and into the 90s, I think. So, and I didn't get into Studio K until like 1986, 87.
A dance club, is that kind of like what we know today as a club where people just go and drink and
No, it was inside of Knott's Berry Farm. It was kind of like a teen club.
Oh, okay.
So it was very safe. I mean, you had all ages in there, like family type thing, but it was a dance club. My sister would go there, my older brother. So I would hear stories from them, but that's where the dancers were going. So they had two spots in there, Studio K and Cloud 9. And there were both dance clubs inside of Knott's Berry Farm.
Oh, wow.
Crazy.
For anybody out there wondering, like when you say ghetto blaster, like back then, if you wanted portable sound to dance, you had to carry a big speaker. It wasn't like today where you could carry a little 5-10 inch Bluetooth speaker on your bag and just listen to something.
Right. From what I remember, the term that we were using was ghetto blaster. And of course, it got kind of silly when people were trying to emulate what we were doing. There's always that, and this kind of bothers me a bit, is when people do throwback stuff and they mix up the 80s and 90s, or they jumble it all together. Like even in the 80s, there was little mini eras within the 80s decade. There was the early 80s, then there was the mid 80s, and then there was the late 80s, so it's not all, and by the time the 90s came around, that was kind of throwback for us if you were doing this thing, but people jumble it all together. And that kind of bothers me a bit, but you had to have been on the front lines of the street scene to really know the difference. But my memories are like Christmas morning, one of my crew members, showing up, with his box bumping Shaka Khan. And it's the excitement of Christmas morning. He's bumping it. And man, who knows what happened to that ghetto blaster. But I have those memories. I was actually there when that was a thing, and it was mostly just neighborhood kids carrying, the sounds that they were listening to, the mixtapes that we would get from the swap meet, the mixes that we were recording from K-Day, trying to tune it in and manually recording them off the radio and then playing them when we'd hang out.
So you would have to listen to K-Day, record it with a cassette, a blank cassette.
Yeah.
Kind of press play to record.
Press record.
Stop.
Yeah.
And record again.
No, press record. And then, of course, during the commercials, pause it. And then, have it recording in and eventually have yourself a good mix. But in Orange County, it was going in and out. So you'd catch some of that static, and just hope that you got a good recording that night, But aside from that, there were, by 84, you could go to what we used to call La Mirada Swap Meet, which is Santa Fe Springs Swap Meet now. You could go and get mixtapes, In Vibe Saturday night, or the best of George Clinton, or, and you would get clean mixes and recordings from local DJs, so you'd put that in your box. But I was also fortunate to early on be around hip hop DJs. So one of our crew members a little later in the 80s was DJ Pisces, and he would collect records. So we were getting, the music and making our own tapes as well. You know, we would go to the swap meets or to the record stores and get our own albums. You know, we're collecting vinyl. My brother mostly, you know, he was collecting
In
vinyl.
your opinion, someone like you that would have to dig for the sound, right? Go to the Swami, go to a record store, go here, go there, record your own cassette, right? So now, fast forward to 2026, a teenager just got to go to like Spotify or Apple Music, and they could listen to a song right off the back, whatever they want.
Right.
How does that transition make you feel?
Well, let me rewind a little bit. Okay. When one of the early pieces of vinyl that I fell in love with was the early freak beat Egyptian Lover music. And I remember putting the needle on the record and being fascinated. I just stare at the grooves in the vinyl and being fascinated of the sounds coming out of it.
Just that one sound when they hit the needle, like,
Well, the beat, you know, boom, 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 boom. And I would take it back and play it. And what I didn't know was I was actually hearing the beats that were being made from a TR 808 drum machine. I didn't know that back then until later on in life. But specifically, 1983, there was a song called Dial a Freak from Uncle Jam's Army, Egyptian Lover, that I would have to, now trip on this, I would actually have to sneak listen to the song at home because my mom wasn't having it because it was kind of naughty.
okay.
So 1983, little Dino would be listening to Dial a Freak like, oh, I like this, you know? Rewind a little bit. 1982, I think it was 82, George Clinton, the electric spanking of War Babies. The intro part of it used to freak me out for some reason. So as a kid, my brother would tease me and play it, and I'd get freaked out. Like it would like kind of scare me. I'd later understand that it's a little profound, but that funk music coming out of like the vinyl and the sounds is so different. I'll give you an example. I was at a B-boy session this past Tuesday. Okay. The music is coming out of a speaker through a phone, and they're playing a mix of break beats. So at first I was kind of nodding my head, but after a few minutes, I was like, wait a minute, something's not right here, because everything seems so hollow to me. Very, what's the word? Not shallow, but I just wasn't feeling it the way I would feel other hip hop songs. Let me get to my point. What I'm trying to get at is that as I was listening to the beats, I'm like, well, it's there, but it's just there's no layers to it. There's no depth to it.
As an architect, you could tell the difference. You're like, ooh, there's something missing there.
Well, see, I'm not a producer, so I'm having a hard time articulating it. Yeah. What I'm trying to say is that when I hear music from like the 70s and 80s, there's layers, there's depth to it. And when somebody is trying to recreate and produce break beats now for like breaking battles and stuff, mostly because of licensing issues, like I don't feel the depth in it. It doesn't move me. You know what I'm saying? Whereas a lot of the music that was made in the 70s and 80s and 90s, it moves me. It does something to me. It's almost like a transmission, you know? And when music, so let me give you the comparison of I'll give you one little comparison. A couple years ago, I participated in this thing, a party called 808 Day. Okay. The lineup: Arabian Prince, J Rock, Rhetmatic from the Beat Junkies, Egyptian Lover, Peanut Butter Wolf. Like they're spinning, right? The flyer, no specifics, just 808 Day, the lineup, the time, the address. Boom, you know, be there, right? So what I'm trying to describe here is that when I was there, it actually felt like hip hop without it having to be spelt out for you. It was just happening. Why? Because it was being played by real hip hop DJs with that experience of actually from the 80s and 90s. There's an energetic and
a vibe.
A certain vibe, a certain experience that unless you actually live through it, you don't carry it. It's like you carry it in your cells and like every atom, I don't know the terms, but it's like you're carrying it with you. So when you're spinning as a DJ that started in like 83 or 84 and you're still doing it now, it's very different than the kid that got all the music downloaded from his uncle, that just got like 1,000 songs on a USB or something. And I'm not knocking it either. Thank goodness that we could share music like that. But when he's playing it, it doesn't do it for me. I can actually sense the difference,
Gotcha.
of a DJ that is carrying that experience and that energy of the 80s and 90s and so forth. Yeah.
Man, the vibe and the energy.
Yeah, and I could continue to elaborate, but I think eventually that would be like a book or something.
Is it fair to say there was something here on the West Coast already as far as dance prior to breaking coming in?
There was always partying going on.
Yeah.
It's like one element that I think a lot of if you got into hip hop a little later in life, one experience that we got was the actual party experience. I'm talking about family parties, backyard parties, the hall parties, the I'm trying to say too much at one time. Just to get down.
Mhm.
There wasn't a purpose other than just you could be at a barbecue, having a gathering, and it'll turn into a dance party, but it wasn't planned. So a lot of the backbone of who Dino is comes from backyard parties, comes from family parties. It was already there was if I was to describe the style of dance that I do, aside from breaking and pop, it was just dancing to music. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it existed because birthday parties existed. It existed because celebrations existed. You get what I'm saying?
Because I know a lot of guys say
Yeah.
that in the West Coast, they was already popping before breaking came in. Is that true?
That was the first thing I saw.
Okay.
So even rewind back to when I showed up to Buena Park, I remember this kid, Sean Flores. I specifically remember this, where you know how you line up to get into the classroom? He's like, "Hey, do you?" And I'm like, what is that? He's like, "Do you like?" He's asking me if I pop, and I was like, "Well, no, but I remember that memory, and I remember that kid's face. Like I'm seeing it in my head." And he's like, "Do you?" So this is 1983, and then eventually it all kind of, for me, it all kind of happened at once. Pop in, break in, and seeing lock in. And and this isn't really talked about a lot either, it wasn't so out of the ordinary to see early hip hop dancers doing it all mixed in together. So unlike the exact formula for breaking, like, oh, you got to do the top rock, footwork, and freeze. Here on the West Coast, or at least what I observed in 1983, 84, 85, actually the kids, the dancers were mixing it all up. So it wouldn't be so out of the ordinary to see someone pop in and then jump into breaking and into
Ooh.
moves, because it was so new. It wasn't so genre specific. Like I'm just a popper, I'm just a breaker, I'm just a locker. You're kind of trying to do it all. And then eventually you got good at one thing. Yes, this was before me. There were people pop in and lock in specifically, but I know that when I got into it, it was all shared as a street dance scene. So in 1983, I was seeing locking, popping, and breaking and party dancing just as a whole.
Gotcha.
And we were dancing to like all the early electro funk and the hip hop that was coming in,
Gotcha.
and which wasn't very much, by the way.
You mentioned Teddy was a big influence as far as the attire, right?
Yeah.
Getting into hip hop and discovering the attire, maybe sometimes having to make it yourself because it's not available. Was it hard to come across that attire? Like, was it something I could just go to a swap meet and purchase? Or is it something that I got to go get a magazine and make myself?
Eventually, it became available. You mentioned the swap meet. So in about late 83, 84, there was a certain style, with baggies, outerwear Converse,
Converse like Chuck Taylor's?
no, like high top Converse.
Okay.
And cut off sleeve shirts. And I would go to the swap meet to get heat pressed Playboy Bunny images on it. So people were already doing that in the swap meet, offering like, I wouldn't be able to tell you like the artists or anything, but I know Playboy Bunnies doing tuts and stuff like that were like on my shirt as iron-ons.
Mm.
So it was just putting together outfits early on from things that we were
Because I know
piecing
the
together.
Old English font was very popular too.
Yeah. So it was either that. I got more into just hand painting stuff on my jackets because that's what I saw. You know, when I think the first time I saw that was at a roller rink. This dude had a bombed up jacket, and I was like, and I remember the drawing. It was like a character holding 2 bricks. There was graffiti. I was like, whoa, that's cool. I want to make my own. There's other ones with like the He-Man character, Orko spray painting, and like just cool, you know, like early hip hop style graffiti. And I was just like, that's cool. I want to do that. So we're, you know, custom doing our own things.
Did the Kangol and the belt buckles and the Adidas and stuff like that was ever something that was part of your attire?
It was, and it came in phases. Okay. Because even the way the term B-boy is used now is very specific to break boy breaking. We were actually, and I might have gotten this term wrong, but back then in the mid 80s, we were using that term B-boy to describe somebody that was just having that look of hip hop, that was into hip hop. Kangol, a rope chain, the track suits.
Gazelles.
Yeah, that was a B-boy to us. We didn't know, like, maybe we're using the terminology wrong, but then again, even East Coast rappers were using the terminology like in their songs, like B-boy, you know, and the arms crossed.
Gotcha.
And you would see characters, B-boy characters, you know, boom, Kangol, you know, like rope chain, all that. So it is B-boy when we were using it, it was kind of like a term describing a hip hopper. Gotcha. You know, somebody that just rocked that kind of like
the full essence of hip hop.
That essence with the gear and like just looking super clean and like just dope, you know? Yeah. So then the term got a little more well defined when people started breaking down like how specific it was to breaking. You know, this is just a term we use to describe the dudes that are breaking, you know?
Hey, correct me if I'm wrong, but late 80s, hip hop starts to fade off in a way, and a new style of dance starts developing?
Well, let me tell you this. I was on the front lines of every stage and phase of this dance from 1983. You can say up until now, even though I've kind of slowed down to go into every single thing.
Yeah.
But I saw the transition of all the different styles, even when break-in was considered dead. You know, I remember 1986. By 1986, a lot of my friends were, or like not my friends, but my peers. You know, they got out of like breaking with this mentality of like it's played out, and they got into like, I lived in Orange County, so it was like surfing, skateboarding, BMX, freestyle, and I specifically remember sitting in the living room like in tears because the energy of hip hop was kind of being like almost like pushed out. And I was listening, I shared this story with Cosmo D of Nucleus, of Jam On It fame and Computer Age. I was listening to Computer Age and I was just feeling so sad that I didn't see kids breaking anymore. And I remember that day, even as a kid, that I was like, no, I'm going to keep doing this. I don't care if it's played out. I'm going to keep doing it. So as me doing early breaking, even though I wasn't that great at breaking, I got into the what was later coming like in 1986, 87 was like a lot of the hip hop dances. You know, they had a name for all of them, like the Fila, the Troop, the this, the that, the Nissan, like there were so many names for, and then eventually, of course, like the more better known ones, like the Reebok, the Cabbage Patch, all that. Running Man, a little later in the 80s. But I stayed in touch with all that. So I was gravitating towards those styles where a lot of it was kind of like a little more up style versus, you know, getting down and breaking. But my style, I came out of breaking.
Mhm.
So I still had some of those moves. It's just the styles were kind of evolving. And we can't not as hip hop disregard hip hop dance that was happening in the late 80s and early 90s. You know, for me, some of aside from what was going on the West Coast, I had influences from Brooklyn. One of them is Cliff Love, who used to dance for Houdini.
Okay.
He wasn't traditionally breaking, he was like a hip hop dancer. My other friend, Divine Styler, hip hop freestyle. Hip hop freestyle to me. And that was Brooklyn mixed in with like LA styles, you know? So it evolved, is what I'm trying to get at. You know, it went from breaking, popping, locking into like an evolved late 80s, early 90s style.
Was there like a specific name for that style? Was it kind of like a freestyle dance, or what was it?
In 1988, I had a crew called Freestyle Posse, and what we were calling what we were doing freestyle dance.
Okay.
And it's not, let me clarify, it has nothing to do with the genre of music called freestyle. Although I love getting down to that music
Like
too.
Lisa type stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was just a party crew scene and, club scene. And it's great. I still dance to that to this day. But what I'm talking about when I was in that crew, Freestyle Posse in 1988, 89, 90, what I was doing was freestyle hip hop dance. And that was a combination of all styles into my own style. So what I was trying to do was all my influences up until then was to mix them all up and create my own style. And we were calling it hip hop freestyle.
So a little pop, a little break, maybe a little.
And it, you could say like a purist would be like, well, it's kind of not specific. It's not purely one style, but I actually liked it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I actually mixed up the formula to eventually create Dino style. And to this day, I still rock that style. But it's interesting that a couple of the people that were down with some of my early dance crews ended up becoming some of the most influential B-boys in the world.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So even though they were coming out of freestyle dance crews, they were breaking. And we, contrary to popular belief, if you were a freestyle dancer that came out of the 80s, you respected all styles, and vice versa. Some of my breaking friends respected the style I rock. So yeah, it's like, it was all, if you were hip hop, and it basically what I'm saying is either you're whack or you're dope, and it didn't matter what style you rocked,
Let me ask you this, brother. What was making people feel that breaking was played out? How did that come about?
I think it was just an idea that caught on like a virus. You know what I'm saying? So if as kids, because we were all teenagers, if somebody says something like, "Oh man, that's played out. That's whack that you're still doing that," it might influence you to not want to do that. Sure, the styles were evolving, but me as a lover of just all styles, I was still very much interested in seeing the breakers, and especially during the resurgence of breaking. In '91 when I first saw Iceman, I was like, whoa, like look at the way he's dropping into his windmills. Look at the way his power moves. Like, even as a freestyle dancer, I was like respecting it and amazed by it because it reminded me of the 80s.
Where did you see him in '91? Sorry to cut you off.
This was at a teen dance club called the Palace in Anaheim. So I saw some of the best dancing ever during that era of dance, of street dance, of hip hop dance, was in the very early 90s. And that's when I first saw Iceman. And then that was like the beginning of the resurfacing of breakers that were dancing in the 80s to kind of get back into it. So some of them had stopped. But there was a couple key people. Around that time is when I met Easy Rock, who would eventually become one of the top 10 B-boys of all time. I met him at the La Mirada Swap Meet, and I won't get into that story because it's very lengthy. but he got down with my crew, Hip Hop Function. And then eventually in 92, I think he got down with Rocksteady crew,
West Coast Rock City.
Yeah. But he was, he was a part of my dance crew for a bit. A little bit after, Kulski, who was also recruited by Rocksteady crew, was in my dance crew before he got into Rocksteady crew.
Oh, wow.
So after Hip Hop Function kind of fizzled out, my dance crew, I kept dancing, and then I come across Kulski, so him and I start dancing together. And even though like a lot of people do credit me for influence and a lot of people don't, but he always does. And he eventually became part of Rocksteady crew, in the 90s though. So, but he credits me for bringing the experimentation part of his dance, the, not following a certain formula, being a little more unique in your approach, because I was coming off as experimental, as a freestyle dancer. So he adopted some of that and then he brought it into his breaking. But when I first saw him break, same thing that I felt when I first saw Iceman, same thing that I felt when I first saw Easy Rock. It reminded me of 1984. Mm-hmm. And I've always loved that, And I saw Kulski break and I was like, yo, he's got that style. But what's funny is that the dude, Marcelino, that was inspiring him in the 80s was actually kind of feuding with Teddy, the dude that inspired me in Buena Park in the 80s. And then 10 years later, Kulski and I are dance partners. Yeah. So that's kind of a funny, weird twist to it, is that the people that we were looking up to were enemies back in the 80s. And then in the early 90s, Kulski and I ended up becoming dance partners. He spent a few years dancing with me, and then eventually Kulski got into Rocksteady crew. So the point I'm trying to make is that as a dancer, there was no segregation really for me. It was either you're a dope or you're a whack.
Let me ask you this, brother. What kind of got breaking to come back?
I think the people that are brave enough to say that it never went away
and keep doing it
and that kept doing it. Because let me describe the two different type of people that were breaking in the 80s. You had the diehard people that were breaking, that loved it, and that maybe had to stop because of family responsibilities, whatever. And then you had the kind of person that was part of that group that everyone is breakdancing. Because there was a big breaking explosion. And I use that word breakdancing just because that's what it was being called back then. So you had all kinds of kids in the suburbs, kids on TV, the commercials.
Everybody
was breakdancing, But what happened after that, so you get the kind of person that's like, oh, I used to do that. Break out with the cardboard. Come on, and like, oh man, I remember that. You guys are still doing that. And it's like, you have that person. That was a very brief stage in their life in the 80s. Okay. It was kind of like a trendy thing. And then you got the person that was like in it to win it. So that person, that breaker, eventually kind of maybe got into other dance styles, kept breaking with just a small batch of friends. But eventually when those brave people started breaking again, then the energy caught on again. And I'm telling you right now, dude, I could count them on these two hands, how many people were breaking in the early 90s. Right now, there are thousands of breakers around the world.
Yeah.
In LA, there was just a handful. And I'm telling you, I could count them on that were relevant.
Who do you say those people are?
Oh, it's like Iceman, like Easy Rock, like Little Caesar, and of course, you got your local heroes, but
Gremlin,
Zulu Gremlin, like, yeah. So they were like the people that were ushering it in. But I think for the people that maybe not, let me mention the people that maybe didn't have a big name, like those big names, like like the Rocksteady crew and all them. What about the dudes that were just like feeling nostalgic and feeling like they want to be a part of the energy? There was those breakers too. And maybe they didn't have the biggest names, but they were like, I'm so down with this. And that's when, you know, those dudes became the uncles that inspired like the new generation.
Yeah.
Like the 90s kids that got into breaking, the early 2000s kids. They remember that uncle that used to break that, you know, would just bust out, you know, for nostalgic reasons, you know. But I think what brought it back was just that fever, that thing of that nudge to do what was gifted onto us. You know, it was a gift from God, you know, this dance, and for us to just express it and be able to and find our counterparts. We're like, man, we found each other. Like, yeah, you know, that's how Easy Rock kind of describes it when he first met me. He's like, yo, like, where'd you get your Pumas? Like, yo, like, man, who are you guys? Like, kind of like, I've been looking for y'all. Like,
Yeah.
and then he, you know, he was doing airbrushing at the swamp meet and was into lowrider culture, which is all relevant, you know, gang culture, lowrider culture, street culture. It's all relevant to what we do. But he was like, oh, I've been itching for this. And then, you know, I have nothing to do with his success, by the way. Let me clarify that. You know, he took off and became like a world influence, but it was that kind of thing where you found your family, you know what I'm saying? So.
And LA, I know the hip hop shop had a big part in bringing hip hop back as far as b-boying and stuff like that.
Mm.
Did you visit that place?
Oh, yeah.
And how was that experience for you?
Yeah, we actually would go to Melrose and just hang out. And, you know, we actually, one event specifically was Fat Cap Day in 92. And my dance crew is listed on the bottom at the the last crew listed, Hip Hop Function out of Orange County as special invites. And back then, Easy Rock was still part of Hip Hop Function. He entered the Fat Cap Day breaking battle. And that was when people really got like aware of who he was, I believe. But we were going there as a crew, as Hip Hop Function. And at the hip hop shop, there was that foundational essence of hip hop, but you also had like the new era of hip hop visiting, you know, and not just the dancers, like the graffiti kids, you know, the DJs, like anybody that was into that culture was popping in and hanging out on a Saturday. You know, you go get a burger, you'd walk around Melrose and you just hang out, pick up magazines, pick up flyers, you know, and see what's up. That's where it was happening, you know. But then that became the breeding ground for that revolution to happen, you know, with the people that were bringing breaking back. But you also had like freestyle dancers popping in there.
Okay.
You know, Will I Am from Black Eyed Peas would, you know, he was more of a freestyle dancer, in my opinion. He would be dancing in there, you know, and like different freestyle dancers would be hanging out. As my style dancer, I would just like that old footage of the hip hop shop. You could just see me just standing there watching. I'm in all that old footage and I'm there with my crew and we're just watching all the B-boys get down, you know, just enjoying it and appreciating it, you know?
Yeah.
So it was a great time. But, you know, aside from hip hop, I got into other things. Like, you know, I was into house music. I was into all these other genres of music. So, but it was just good for hip hop at that time. Yeah.
You know, talking about the hip hop shop, I also want to share that Orange County had their spots too, like Coos Cafe.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And did you visit Coos Cafe?
Oh, dude, I was definitely a part of all that. And we actually had a dance crew called 17th Parallel out of Coos Cafe. And in that dance crew or dance group, Coolski, Rocksteady crew, David Elsewhere, who ended up becoming like a phenomenon in the early 2000s. He's credited for having the first viral dance video. It's the guy in the orange shirt that's doing like this crazy popping. Maybe you could put a little post of that. He was down with that crew. All the local Santa Ana breakers in Orange County, all the MCs, the producers, the DJs, they had a graph yard in the back. It was the mecca for that time era of the 90s, mid 90s into the late 90s. And yeah, you know, my friend Seth was putting together all the events. You know, we would go, we'd practice there on Sundays, you know, and hang out. Yeah, a lot of good times there.
And was this like a teen center or was it more like the hip hop shop?
No, like Coos Cafe was actually a restaurant, I think. And it had different nights. They would do like a poetry night. They would have punk bands playing there. So it was a venue that was being used for multiple reasons.
Because I know that they spoken word as well.
Yeah. So they would have different nights, but I was just participating in the hip hop nights. But occasionally we would pop into some of the punk shows.
Ooh.
Yeah. So you would get graffiti and punk, Orange County, hip hop, all coming together. So it was great. There was no like division there, really. I mean, you had specific nights, but it's like even some of the punk kids would show up to the hip hop stuff.
Oh, wow.
So it was just kind of like a neighborhood, like place to get like underground music and anything like
and hang out and vibe out. And
like street level. It was so street level.
That's
come
dope.
on, like you had a graffiti artist going there. You had like the some of the illest DJs that eventually became big names. You know, you had like occasionally Seth would book like some bigger names, and yeah, it was a great time, man. It was just so raw. It was Coos Cafe was so dope in the 90s, man.
Shout out Coos Cafe.
Yeah, for sure.
And you guys also had a hip hop shop, Funky Revolution.
Well, I wasn't technically a part of it. Easy Rock worked there, and I remember he put up one of my. I wrote a poem called "True Rockers."
Yeah.
About true hip hop, and he actually put it up in a display case, which was kind of cool. But yeah, I went there on a couple of occasions, but it was actually Easy Rock that was a little more connected to that. A lot of the local writers, because it was a weird time. It was around the time where a lot of the tag banging was being exploited and like romanticized and glorified. You see it on Fox 11. So there was a lot of like tag gang type stuff going on. But someone like Easy Rock was bringing a cultural aspect to it. So it was like the shop for local hip hop where you could get hip hop, you know.
So Funky Revolution, was that sort of kind of like another style hip hop shop in a way?
In a sense, yeah.
Okay.
In a sense. And even though I don't think they're like trying to bite it, I just think that they, you know, people just needed to have a shop representing the elements. But like I said, from what I remember, it was kind of a lot of the kids that were barely getting into writing and didn't really have the backbone or the history of anything hip hop related. They were just getting into like tag banging, kind of gave that era kind of a bad name.
Gotcha.
You know, where we were coming from a cultural aspect. You know, we were always coming from a cultural aspect.
So the shop kind of helped show these kids the culture of it.
Yeah.
Culture
Yeah,
rather
yeah.
than this other stuff.
Yeah, I remember they were having like battles in there, and you know, so
That's dope.
yeah.
What part of Santa Ana was Funky Revolution in?
Oh my God, good question. I have the old flyers with the address, but yeah, I don't remember the specific address. But even up until now, it's like Santa Ana has always been the last breaking battle that I judged was in Santa Ana, and the only reason I agreed to do it, not to say that I'm so in demand, but I stopped saying yes to judging battles because I was just kind of removed from battling myself, so it didn't make sense. But B-Boy Don and B-Boy Iceman asked me to join in on the judging panel 1 year ago this month in front of GCS in Santa Ana. And when they mentioned where it was going to be, outside on concrete, surrounded by graffiti in the heart of Santa Ana, yes, I'm there. And yes, I will do it because my heart is in it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because I'm tied into that, you know, and that history of that part of Orange County goes back to 1980 for me, you know?
Gotcha.
And it's like, yes.
There's the pride in it.
Whereas, you know, if somebody approaches me to judge nowadays, kind of like, you know, I'm a little removed from the battle scenes and all that. Probably not, but thank you. You know, I appreciate it. But when it's something like that, I'm like, yeah.
I'm coming.
Yeah, let's do it.
I got 2 last questions for you, brother, before we get out of here. One, I know you and Egyptian Lover have a good relationship.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about that?
Oh, man. I think what happened for me, we've been friends for decades, but what happened for me, what's going on now as I'm tagging along to the shows and helping with the merch, and we did an art collaboration where I'm hand painting Egyptian Lover legacy inspired hats. So I'm hand painting each one. Each one is a one of a kind collectible, and he autographs each hat that I paint. So people are paying like premium prices just to own this Egyptian Lover Dino collaboration. But aside from that, is that what I think happened? So early on, I was just occasionally dancing for him or participating in like behind the scenes videos, when he would shoot a video, and we became friends over the decades. But what it did for me after this long journey of hip hop through all the stages and phases, it actually made me return back to my foundation here on the West Coast. Because in my opinion, he was the kind of like the big energy of early West Coast hip hop. Some people say West Coast electro funk, West Coast hip hop, early West Coast rap. It doesn't matter. He was the original big energy for me, so it made me return back to that kid that was listening to his records in 83 and 84 and 85. And when I go out with him, what it does for me, it makes me be a part of something that doesn't need to be spelled out, as far as like what I see a lot in hip hop events is kind of like, oh, from 6 to 8, we're going to have one-on-one this. From 8 to this, we're going to do that. For this hour, we will have social dancing. From 11 to this, we're going to do that. And it's like, when I go out with him, everything just happens naturally. It's like he's up there DJing, rapping, playing the 808. I'm in the crowd dancing. Maybe a circle might bust out. Maybe it doesn't. Girls dancing, like everyone's having a good time. Everything is just happening naturally. And that's what I'm in love with.
Gotcha.
Is that it doesn't need to be such a specific formula when it comes to going out and doing hip hop and having fun. It's like, what it's doing for me, working with him over the past few years, I don't even want to say working, just enjoying life, and participating in the things he does, is that it's bringing back that essence of, I remember it being, and yeah, it's like, for me, he is the originator when it comes to West Coast.
Shout out to Egyptian Lover.
Shout out to the Egyptian Lover for sure. And it's actually funny because I actually met Roger from Uncle Jam's Army first.
Oh, wow.
And then I jumped on stage with Egyptian Lover a couple times when they were doing the old school shows in Anaheim.
Okay.
So it just made sense because I hardly ever leave Orange County. So, but this was decades ago. And what I like about that, and lastly, what I'll say is that it all happened organically. I didn't like get in his face about like, oh, let's collaborate. Like, no, it took decades, for me to like do an art collaboration. And the way it came about, which is organic and natural, let's just have some fun with it. And it ended up being a thing,
That's the best way.
Yeah. And it wasn't like, there was no plan. It was just like, I busted out one hat. I did some art. He started becoming more aware of the stuff I was doing on sneakers. He's like, man, that's so dope. And I was like, well, yeah, maybe we could do something. But it took years, Yeah. But now it's like I said, I just tag along. Me, AJ, and Egyptian Lover, doing the, I don't travel like he does, but, just anything when it's local, I'm there. So, yeah.
Big ups to Egyptian Lover, man.
Yeah, man.
Last question I got for you before we get out of here. For any young boy, any young girl that will watch this, that's trying to get into hip hop, what can you say to them?
I feel that my perspective, my beliefs, and my philosophy and everything comes from actually being there during the very first wave of Southern California hip hop, being one of those kids. So it'd be very almost intrusive for me to be like, you got to do this. You got to pay attention to that. You got to blah, 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 blah. I think that it has to come naturally for them to want to do it versus being forced to do something. I'm going to give you one last example. Okay. And, there's one of my favorite dancers right now, and I'm gonna give her a shout out. Her name is Boogie with Sasha.
Boogie with Sasha.
Sasha. Why is she one of my favorite dancers? Because on her own, she's young, okay? Besides her having just like a natural groove and natural energy about the way, she's not doing any big moves. She's not flipping and do, because most people be like, your favorite dancer, oh, it's this guy that does these air flare combo into blah, blah, blah. Oh my God, he's so dope. For me, it's like, I'm seeing the pure like connection to the funk in her, to the energy, to the dance, to the music, okay? And let me tell you why. She actually goes out on her own and digs through vinyl to find all the old school music that she actually enjoys in a genuine way, versus having somebody stand over her shoulder like, you need to listen to this. You got to listen to this. You got to do it like this. She's doing it naturally. And she's out there, out like in the scene, just dancing, not on big stage. Well, she does do like big stuff, but she's just doing it naturally and hanging out, on her own, because she's got a desire for everything that's old school to learn about it, but she's doing it on her own. She's not being forced to do it. So to answer your question, for a young person, if you're really loving this, go out and do those things on your own. Touch the records, look through the records, show up, not just when it's like, when there's something in it for you. Like sometimes you'll get paid, sometimes you won't, as a dancer, as a DJ, whatever. You just do it because you love it. Like you really have a heart for it, and you're in love with the energy of it.
And they will come.
And it'll all happen naturally.
Again, brother, I want to thank you for stopping by. It was a pleasure having you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
To anybody tuning in, you guys heard from Dino himself. Make sure to like and subscribe. And also make sure to head over to gotnocontrol.com. Check our website, grab some merchandise, and much more. Till next time, guys.
Got no control.
Peace.